So our next speaker is Liad Yosef. Liad is a front-end architect and tech lead at Duda, and he's in charge of its client-side infrastructure technologies and performance. He is a web dev enthusiast for over a decade now. He's worked with React, Webpack, and all the buzzwords that you hear around in the front-end world. So he's the right person to tell us all about the best user experience as well. And yes, Liad, how are you? How are you doing?
Great, I'm great. How are you?
I'm good too. All excited for the talk?
Yes, I hope you had a good break. We're going to talk about some really cool and interesting stuff today.
Okay, so welcome you, Liad. Over to you.
Okay, hi. So hi everyone, my talk is called Weekend Adventure, and we're going to talk a little bit about building side projects or weekend projects, and how, especially in those times, we can benefit from building them easily, quickly, using already existing tools, and how we can build something that will help bring people together. So a little bit about myself. So I'm the client architect in a company called Duda. And I have over 12 years of experience building clients. And I'm also an analog astronaut for the Austrian Space Forum, but we'll talk about it maybe later in the Q&A. And the subtitle of this talk is called "If You Build It, They Will Come." They will come, and it means that if you have an idea to build something, sometimes it's really hard to get that idea from your head to some application. But we'll go over the steps that you can do it right now. And if you build it correctly, you'll have a lot of users, and I'll talk about the use case that we have. So the first question that you need to ask yourself when I'm talking about spending your weekend to build a project is obviously why? I mean, it's much easier to just sit and watch Netflix if you have free time, right? And sometimes in those times we might have free time, so it's much easier to consume content than producing or building something. But the idea is that all of us have a lot of time right now. Even if it's because we're at home or we're working remotely, we have some free time that we can use to build something, right? And in this quarantine times, you can see courses that maybe the best AI courses or how to improve yourself while in quarantine, and you might be tempted to take like a quick path to be like the best AI developer or the best front-end developer in 2 days. But I think it's much easier if you think about building something in order to present it as a project or in your portfolio, or even to learn from it. So I think like the initial thought is, okay, I'm going to build something that's going to be helpful, that's going to connect people, maybe some sort of a e-learning platform with video chat and everything. But then you think to yourself, now it's my weekend, I'll probably want to build a game. So we're going to go step by step on how to build a collaborative game in a weekend. So I chose a game called Splendor. Splendor is a board game. If you don't understand, you don't have to really understand the rules in order to understand this stuff, but it's a board game and it has cards that you can pick and you can trade. And there's a lot of real-time interaction going over. And you can use chips to buy cards, like small tokens to buy cards. And it's actually really cool. It's a really cool game. It's really easy to learn how to play it. It's very colorful, so it's nice to put it in an application. It even has a Marvel version, which is nice, and yeah, Wakanda forever. So we want to build something like that, right? We want to have the board, like the game in the middle of the screen, and then we want to have some sort of a chat in the right-hand side, and we obviously want to have a video chat with all of our friends, and maybe some more of our friends, and maybe one of our more older friends. So we want to build all of that, and it can look daunting if you think about it. If you look at it and you say, okay, how do I get to this final result? But we'll see how it's going to be easy. So the thing is that if you want to build a React side project and you Google online how to start a React side project, then you see some articles that are almost helpful, but not so helpful, because you see how to start a React side project, and you see the article here is only 2 minutes read. So it's basically just do this and this and this and this, and then I leave to you to do all the rest. And you can see tutorials that just say, okay, create React app, my app, and then cd my app npm start and figure it out from there. or just follow your passion. And it kind of feel like that, right? So how to draw an owl? Just draw 2 circles and then draw the rest of the owl. So it can look daunting, especially if you just open your IDE and what you see is this blank code IDE, and you see this blank screen when you start to run your application, and you don't really know what to do with it, right? So it's very, very easy to get frustrated and just say, okay, I'm going back to Netflix. But no, so we'll talk about, it's called useSideProject, but we'll talk about how we can use code in order to build it. And we're gonna, like I said, build the game Splendor, and we're gonna go over how to build each one of those parts very easily with existing tools. So the first thing that you want to do, the first thing that you want to put your time into is the planning, right? Because you have an idea on your head and you need to plan it first before you start writing the code. So this is a tool that's called Excalibur. It's a really cool tool. I recommend to look it up. It's basically just a painter or paintbrush, but it's really easy to try and frame your ideas, to try and frame how the canvas that you're drawing on would look like. So for example, we know we want to have some sort of a game area, right? Some sort of a box that's the game area. And then we want to show the player hand. So what cards the player that's currently playing, what card does it have in his hand, how many tokens, and then we want to maybe put some space for all players to see each other, maybe a video chat, and then maybe a textual chat. So we take a look at that, and if you like squint your eyes, you can actually see how it looks like what we want to get in the end. And when you draw it, it's very easy to separate concerns and say, okay, I'm going to work now only on the game area or only on the chat. So it's really easy to do that. So the next thing that you want to do is set up. And since this is a React conference, if you have this empty IDE, this empty Visual Studio screen, so don't get frustrated or don't get too I don't know. Don't let your spirits get down, because there is a light, and this light, you probably know it. It's a create React app, right? So you use npx create React app Splendor. That's the name of the game. And immediately, instead of this empty IDE, you would get filled IDE with all the things that you need already wired. So when you open your browser, you'd see something like that. It's not enough, because that's where most of the tutorials in the internet just stop and tell you, okay, figure it out from there, but we're going to do something with it, okay? So the first thing, let's throw some paint, or let's throw some graphics on that. So let's have a background. So voila, we have the background of some sort of a playing table, and then we'll take this Excalibur drawing that we did, and we'll try to put it on the background. And how would we do that? We'll use some CSS tool, very useful, that's called Grid. So we'll define our main canvas as grid, display grid, and then we'll define the columns. So if you look here, you have, actually you have 4 columns. You have like 3 columns, but one is twice as big as the rest. So you have 4 columns. So I would say, okay, I want to define 3 columns. One of them is 2FR, FR is a fraction. One of them is 2FR, and the other 2 is 1FR. So that's, it's pretty straightforward. And rows, I want to have 2 rows, each in equal size or equal height. So each will take 1 fraction of the space. So they divide the space between them evenly. And then I define the grid areas. And that's a really cool concept, because you have those 6 blocks, right? Because you divide it into 3 columns and 2 rows. And you can just say, okay, I want the leftmost blocks to contain my game area. And then I want to have the topmost right to contain the hand, the bottom to contain the player and the chat. And once you define it, all the elements that you're going to put inside that grid is going to be arranged like you define them, right? So you just put 4 elements, and you define every element would have some sort of a grid area, predefined grid area, and they just put them inside your component, and they just arrange on the board according to what you define. And that's, I mean, just imagine that's really easy. Like in a matter of minutes, you already have your board in front of your eyes. So it went from an idea to something that you already see in front of you, and you can start writing the code, right? Okay, so this is the components, and I'm using here CSS models, but you see that every component has its own grid area. And now you start to design, and that's something that you don't have a shortcut for, right? You have to get graphics, you have to design, you have to use some CSS, and boom, you get your game. And now you're probably thinking, you said that you're gonna tell us step by step how to do it, but the design part or the graphics part is something that you can't use existing tool to populate that for you. So you design it, and then you put it, and then you design this. And let's see what our game board contains. So it's really easy to build it in React, right? So we have the board, and the board, you can see that you have like 3 rows. You have the nobles, which is part of the game, some sort of special cards. Then you have the cards, which are the card array, and then you have the chips or the tokens. This is the final row, and you start like top down, right? You start to define. Okay, I have the nobles, I have the card array, I have the chips, and now you isolate the problems. So now the cards array just need to get the card array, run on it, and generate a card for each one, right? And so you start to isolate it. You're going top down, and then the card. Okay, I'm getting the card data, the image, how many points, how much does it cost, and then I generate the image of the card. And it's really easy to break it down like that. It's not daunting anymore, right? You just divide responsibilities between areas in your application. And then you can start adding the video chat, and you can ask yourself, okay, how do I get this data? Okay, so I have the card data. Where does it come from? How do I know that someone or some player already finished playing, and how does everyone else, all the other players, can see what's happening right now on the board? And this is where interactivity comes into play. So let's say you have the board, right? And the board needs to get some sort of data, nobles, card array, how many chips, and every card needs to get some sort of data, image, points, price. So where do we get this data? So when you start building, only in the beginning, you can put like dummy data, just some JSON objects or some data that you hard-coded, just for it to be something that you can play with. But eventually, you would have to connect to some sort of database, and this is the point where most of the people say, okay, I don't want to start putting databases and sync them and everything. So we have a good solution for that, right? So I chose to talk about Firebase. There are several similar solutions, but Firebase is one of my favorite. So Firebase, the cool thing about it is that it knows to store data and synchronize it between devices. So if someone changes something on one device, it automatically pushes the changes to other devices. And we will see the API. The API is really cool and easy to learn. Firebase has a lot of services. It has storage, and it has hosting, and it has a lot of services. I chose to focus on the Firebase storage, on the real-time database, sorry. So real-time database, it's really easy. You just go to Firebase console, and you start a real-time database, right? And now it's empty because we don't have anything. It's really easy. You do it in the UI. And now you need to add it to our app. So it's it's a one-time step. You have to generate a web app in Firebase, and it just walks you through it, right? So you generate a web app, and then you get a chunk of code. And this chunk of code is what you put your application. So we would install Firebase, we would install the SDK, and then you just add it to our app, right? We take the chunk of code with the API key and everything, just add it to our app. Let's say that our repository is private, so we don't have to worry about API keys leaking. Eventually, we'd have to think about security, but we'll talk about this later. So we just put it right in a file called Firebase storage, and that's it. That's the init that we need. We import it in our main, and we use effects. I saw that Adam Klein had a great talk before the break about hooks, so we're going to use hooks a lot here. So we're going to use effect to init Firebase, and you only have to do it once, and that's it. I mean, that's it. You have once you do it, you already have the connection to a real-time database, and every computer running your app is connected to that database, and it's really cool. So let's take a look a little bit about Firebase API. So they have a really easy to read the docs, but we'll go over the important parts. So to write data, you just need to use those line, and reading data is those line. We'll go with line by line. So to write it, you just get the reference to the database itself, and then you say, hey, I need a reference to the path that I want to change. So in this example, I want to change the picture of the player with this ID, so player/player ID/picture, and I want to set it to be something, right? It's really easy. And how do I read that data? So just remember that it's not something that is synchronous, it's asynchronous. So I can I'm not actually reading the data, but I'm saying when the data is updated, do something. So I just take a reference to the database, again, to the same path that I want to read, and then I say on value. So when a value arrives, just do something. I get the snapshot of the value and I do something with it, and we'll see how we can use it, right? So I can even do it like that. I take the reference, I take the child, and I can either set it to something. You can see here that it's changing it, or I can update it. So the difference between set and update is it's a gentle difference, a small difference, but so set overrides and updates just changes one field. So I can do whatever I want there, and just to read it, I just do on value, right? And then when the value is updated, here on the right you can see the UI of Firebase. When the value is updated, something would happen in my app. So it's easy to wrap everything in a helper function. So change value, we just get the key, the path, right? So we don't have to repeat all the time. And on value, we just get the key and a callback. So it's basically doing what we said. And then when we use it in our app, we just call change value whenever we want to change something in the Firebase, and then on value when we want to respond to something that changed in our database. But it can get messy really fast, and you can understand why. You can imagine why, right? Because in our app, we just call change value with a string, and we can, if we have a typo, or we can just put, if we have several developers, we can just put all the strings that we want, and Firebase would let us to change it. Even if we don't have this path in Firebase itself, even if I don't have player/some player ID/pick, Firebase would allow me to create it and put the value. So what I find helpful is to define a mental scheme of, or a model of the data of your game. So let's see what we have here, right? We have the board, we have the players, we have the chips. So we just define like a mental scheme, a schema, just an object for us. It doesn't go anywhere. Just a schema that says, okay, this is how I want my data to be modeled, right? So I have the table data, which holds which cards I have and which chips I have. I have the player hands, which show me for each player, what does he have in his hand. I have the player's object, which are the name and the profile pics of the players. And why is that important? Because I want to have I want to have the possibility for the players to change it. So if I'm a player and I signed up with a name, I want to be able to change it. So I'm storing it in my database. So just see that when the keys to the player hands are player IDs, and in players, I have a player ID that is mapped to the name and the profile pic. So what I'm working only with IDs, and when I need to actually display the name of the player, I'm looking into the player's chunk in the JSON. Okay, then I have like a general game data if I want, how many players, or which is the current player, who is the current player, it's important. And then I have like this repository or chunk of cards. Again, I'm only working with cards IDs. When I'm saying the player has these cards, I'm not storing the entire data of the card, but just the card ID. And here I have a mapping between the card ID and the view of it, or the data of the card. Okay. So from here, it's easy, right? Because if I have a card and I have the card ID, I have a card component right in the bottom. You can see it, and I have the card ID. I can easily just use. I can use useEffect to call the on value that we wrote earlier. So I'm saying on value card/card ID. You can see here in line 4, and when I do it, I update the state of the card component, right? So when the value is updated, I'm updating the state of the card component, and the card component can display the data on that card, right? So this is the chunk that says, okay, when useEffect, when card ID is changing, just run this useEffect, subscribe to the change in Firebase, and when something is coming back, just update the view. For chips, we can do the same, right? So for chips, we have the same thing. We just use effect. We say on value when something is changing in the table data /chip color, for example. When the number is changing, just I'm doing exactly the same. I'm just listening to changes in Firebase, and then I update my React component to do it. And just see how easy it is to write it, right? Just with a few lines, you made your React component interactive and real time. That's really easy. That's really nice. But it can get messy again because you have to do it in every component that you write. So the cards, you want to listen for cards in Firebase. Chip, you want to listen to chips in Firebase. Current player, you want to listen to current player in Firebase. And you can see that it's a lot of code that it looks exactly the same. And the only thing that changes is the path, right? The path that you're looking in Firebase. So, and if you want to change it, then you have to use callback with the same path. So the easiest thing to do is just create a custom hook. So I created a hook for myself that's called use Firebase. That's whatever it does, it just gets the key and it gets the initial value. And inside of it, it already does the use effect call. It listens to the key. When the data comes, it changes the state, right? And it returns. It also creates a function to change it if you want to change the state, right? So that's the change value that we worked before. And then it returns an array that says, okay, this is the value, this is the current value. This is the function if you want to change the value in Firebase. And this is the status if I found it or not. And then all of this code can easily be reduced to that, right? So in current player, in card, in chip, I just do use Firebase with the key. And then I get back an array that has the value. So in card and chip, I only need the value. I'm not changing them. And in current player, I get the value, and I can also change it. I have the current player, the change player function. And then I can add more components. It's really easy, just one line, right? Just use Firebase. I can add the nobles if I want. I just need to remember to add it to the schema for myself, but I can easily do that. So this is really really easy. You can also build more custom hooks on that, right? So I can use player score that gets a player ID, uses Firebase to get what the player has in hands, the cards, and then run some sort of computation on them, and then returns that. And then I just use player score in my component, which behind the scenes use the Firebase. So this, you can see here real code that we're using use Firebase and how easy it is. And now let's say we want to add chat, like not a video chat, but a textual chat. This thing in the bottom right. So we'll use something that's called React Chat Elements, and that's only for the view. It's a really cool library that allows you to build chat components. We install it, of course, npm install React Chat Elements, and then let's think about how we model it. So we have this is how we want it to look, right? So we know in our schema, we have to have some sort of a chat object that has a list of messages, and each message has its content and who posted it and when it was posted. And then in Firebase, it would look like that, right? So just whenever you want to build something, just imagine the schema that you want for it, like the minimal model that you want for it, and then do it. So we add it to the schema, and this is really easy. This is all the code that you need for the chat, right? You have the messages, push messages, use Firebase, the same use Firebase that we wrote before, right? And then in the message list, which is something that we're using React Chat Elements for, we just give it the data source is the message that we got from use Firebase. And when the input is changing, the on change, we change the message, right? So we do the set current message. And then when the button is clicked, when the send button is clicked, we do the handle send. Handle send meaning take the same push message that you got from use Firebase and update, just put another message. And that's it. That's all you need to have, right? It's really cool. Okay. So this is how a real-time database looks like in Firebase. Okay, so now we have the chat. and it's really nice. And we almost built everything we wanted, right? So just to recap, we used Firebase to our disposal in order to sync the data of the cards and the game and whatever we want. We can just put in Firebase whatever we want. So we use Firebase for that. And then we build on top of it custom hooks. So for example, to calculate the score of a player, I won't store the score itself in Firebase. Why? Because then I would store in Firebase the cards that a player has and the score. And then I would have to sync both of them all the time. And it can be broken really easily. So I would just store the cards the player has, and I would calculate the score on the client code, right? So I would use memo, we see, like the custom hook. So we can build custom hooks to calculate whatever we need. We just need to store our minimal data. And then we use React chat elements in order to build chat on this real time. Now we want to add a video. And the video is really cool because everybody wants a video chat, and it's a really cool thing to add right now to connect people together. But then you start to look in the internet and say, okay, how do I do it? So I build a WebRTC. I use WebRTC protocol to communicate, and then you see all those diagrams, and then these diagrams, and the weekend is getting shorter and shorter. And then when someone asks you, yeah, do you want to build a video chat? No, you don't want to do it anymore, right? It's too complicated. That's not what you signed up for. It's not the use Firebase that it was so easy. But we have services that can help with that. I would talk about something that's called Agora. We have a lot of similar services. Agora is really cool. It gives you a really easy API and it abstracts all the WebRTC from you. So we'll use a service of Agora that's called Video Call. You just install it, again, npm install Agora RTC SDK, and it's really easy. Just look how easy it is. So you create a client, right, with one line of code, and then you join a channel. So for example, the channel is your Splendor game, right? So you join a channel with one line of code. Then you create a local stream with one line of code that's actually saying, okay, turn up the camera, my video camera, and start the feed. And then you publish it. So whoever joins this channel can see it. Again, 4 lines of code so far. And then you listen to event because you published your own stream, but you want to listen when others are publishing theirs. So you just listen to events. So people are joining, and whenever they're joining, you just call stream.play with an element, an element ID, and then you play the stream. So it's really easy. How do you put everything together? So you have, let's say, this class, this Agora, and it's only 35 lines, and that's all you need, right? You create a client, like we said. You hang the events. So when the stream is added, when subscribed, and then when the client is joining the stream, you publish your own stream, and when the client is joining, you just have to initialize it in your component. So in my player's component, I use useEffect to initialize it. So I'm doing the init, like I said, then I'm listening to event, and then I'm joining my channel. And that's it. That's really easy. That's all that's left to be done, right? Agora provides a lot of other APIs to control the video stream. For example, one thing that we would want to do is mute our own audio, right? So we have the local video. We have the place where we stream our own video, and we just need to add to Agora the file that we wrote. We need to add some sort of a method that says, okay, I want to toggle my own audio, and Agora provides, when you have the stream in your hand, it provides a mute and unmute, so it's really easy. So I'm just saying, okay, toggle self audio, true or false, and then you do mute or unmute. And the only thing you need to do is add some sort of an icon. You see that you put like an icon that says, when I'm clicking on it, just toggle the audio, right? So I'm toggling it either true or false. It depends of, I can even query that and say, okay, do I want to show an icon of a microphone or a turned down microphone, like turned off microphone? So that's really easy. And actually, Agora is having a new API currently in beta that is even more terse and shorter than what we saw so far. It's really nice. You can see you just create your microphone audio track, your camera video track, and that's it, and you publish it, and it's much shorter. And I didn't mention that Agora already is also giving you 10,000 minutes for free of audio or video, so you can play with it and build all sorts of POCs and prototypes before you commit to it. So that's really cool. I really encourage you to check out Agora or similar services. Agora is just, I think, one of the easiest I saw to implement, and use this API. Okay, so now the next thing that we want to do. Okay, so we built everything, and it's still running on our local host, and no one can connect to that. And the whole idea of building a real-time interactive some game is for other people to connect. Right? So if we look at our URL, we see we're running on localhost. So what we want to do is we want to deploy it. So I'm using Netlify. It's a really easy service for deployment. You just have to connect it to your GitHub. So you start an account in Netlify, you connect it to some sort of a GitHub repo, and whenever this GitHub repo is changing, Netlify would deploy. Right? So you can see here that I'm saying, okay, whenever my GitHub/Liad Y Splendor board game is changing, whenever someone pushes code, just run the command npm run build, and this is the create react app command, and whatever the build result is, just take it and publish it. And that's it. That's all you need to do. You set it up once, and you basically forget about it. You can also set Netlify YAML if you want in the root of your project, just setting up redirects or maybe displaying a 404 page, but that's not necessary. You can just use the basic setup, and then you see that now you have you get a Netlify subdomain, right? So in our case, Splendor AB6 Netlify.app, and that's something that's open. You can share it. You also get SSL, so HTTPS out of the box. Which is important because, for example, in Agora, you have to use either you run it from localhost or you have to use some sort of an SSL URL to run it. And that's it. So you have your GitHub, and it syncs automatically. You can also add a badge in your GitHub. You see the GitHub repo that says is the build success, is the build pending, is the build failing. And yeah, it's really cool. So let's think what else we can do with those tools. So for now, we have the game, right? We have the game. It's interactive. We can send the URL to someone else. We can play with them. We'll see bugs. We'll see issues, but we can fix them easily because we just change the code, push it to the GitHub, and in a matter of minutes, we have it live, right? But we can also use authentication. So one cool thing that Firebase is giving out of the box is an ability to authenticate someone. And that's really easy because you just need to declare some sort of config. Okay, so for example, here I'm saying, okay, I want the user to authenticate himself with Gmail and with just email and password. And then you just put the Firebase component, the Firebase UI component, styled Firebase auth, you see in line 19. You just put it in your app. And once you have this config, you just need to say, okay, when someone is signed in, what you want to do. In our case, we want to just say, store it locally or something that the user is signed in, right? And now it looks like that. So now when the user is logged into the login page, when it goes to the login page, it sees this sign in with email, sign in with Google, and that's Firebase's UI, right? So you don't need to wire everything. Everything is wired behind the scenes, and you just take care of the UI around it. And once someone is signed in, it would call our callback, right? So it's really easy, right, to do it, just sign in. And then you can see in Firebase all the users that are already logged into your system. And that's really cool. And now you can add actually something like a profile where people they're authenticated, so they can see their own image from Google, from Gmail. They can change their name. They can change everything. You can also do multiple games. You don't have to limit yourself to one, because just remember, in Firebase, everything is a JSON. Everything is an object. So you can just take this object and just add one level, right? So our entire Splendor object can be a part of a bigger object with a lot of other games. So if you want to have multiple games or multiple tables, it's really easy. You just take this object, right, and you put it under game one. our Splendor object, and you can have game 2, game 3, game 4 with the same structure. So just instead of going directly to the key when you want to change something, you're going to first to the game that you're playing, right? And then you go to the key. So if I'm changing the cards, I'm going first to the game that I'm playing, game 1, game 2, game 3, and then I'm changing its cards. Yeah, so we used Excalibur to visualize the game that we wanted, right? And then we used the React to build everything. We used Grid to lay out everything. We used Firebase extensively to take care of interaction and real-time and connectivity. We use also Firebase for the chat and Firebase component for the chat. And we use React chat components for the UI. We used Agora for our video, for everything, to connect all the video together. And I use Mobix to take care of like local state that I want to maintain, but you don't have to use Mobix. You can use just hooks if you want. I use Mobix just to do these computations sometimes. And we use Netlify, you can see here near the URL, in order to deploy everything automatically when the code is changing. And yeah, we use the Firebase Authentication in order to authenticate users and people that are coming into our platform. And I think the main takeaway from everything is if you have an idea, don't be afraid of implementing it. Just do it, right? So if you have an idea and you have like a free 2 days, and now you have these tools in your toolbox, or maybe you can find others, but you have tools that abstract away all the hard things that you need to do. So you have tools that abstract away real-time and WebRTC and WebSockets and everything is abstracted away. You can just use them. So if you have an idea, just use those puzzle pieces to build something. And now it's a time when we need to build those kinds of projects or applications that connect people together with video, or with chat, or with real-time connectivity. And for example, in my case, I built something like that as a side project. And eventually, for myself, and eventually someone reached out to me, some people that do online games, and they wanted to use my technology in order to do their own games. So we're building a project together, which is nice. So yeah, don't let your dreams be dreams, like Shia LaBeouf is saying. And yeah, just do it. And you're awesome, and that's like a quarantined high five. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. You can also send me that's my Twitter handle. And yeah, just if you have an idea, just do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Liad. That was an awesome talk, actually. And I believe side projects are the way you can improve your skills as well. So that was really an insightful talk. Thank you so much. And I will go on to the questions. Yes, we have some. So firstly, the question is, how would you recommend to start if you have only a vague idea of the project?
That's a really good question. Actually, when I started, I had only a vague idea of the project. So I think that if you have only a vague view on how the layout should look, just start by connecting things behind the scenes, because that's infrastructure that you would always need. So just start with connecting the Firebase. If you need a video chat, just start with connecting Agora. And once you'll have it, even if it's just connecting with small data, you would easily, once you write the use Firebase hook, you can easily just build on that. So when I started, I started with, I don't know, just one screen and that's it. But once you have the use Firebase, the sky's the limit, right? You just write a component, put the line of the use Firebase with whatever key you want, and that's it. And you can run with that. So it's good if you have only a vague idea. Just start building the infrastructure, and then it would come.
Thank you. The next one is, when is the time you start collaborating with others, technically or maybe business-wise?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I'm thinking once you have, in my experience, once you have something that's working in a POC level, so it doesn't have to be perfect, far from it, but it's working. And once you have this real-time thing connected, you can actually approach people that you think might be interested in using this platform, because you did all the hard work already. designing it and everything. That's something that you need to do with your business partners. And once you have those business partners, or once you have these people that are interested, only then I would put more developers in. So first make the connection with people that you think might be interesting. So if it's something that's real time, for example, you can approach people that you know that are running game nights and say, hey, we can't run game nights in live, like in real person right now. If you want to run maybe virtual game nights, or if you have people that you know are running businesses that are reliant on interaction with people and you can't do it right now. So just say, hey, I can build you something. I can build you a platform in a week that would satisfy all your needs. And if you see that that the needs are way more than you can handle, then you start inserting other developers. Then you can say, maybe take a friend or something and say, hey, can you help me? Yeah, just decide between yourself, how do you do that?
Thank you. The last question probably. So when you write components like this, even with the use Firebase hook, which helps avoiding a lot of boilerplate code, the React components are tightly coupled to specific DB implementation, in your case, Firebase. What would you suggest to do in order to decouple the components, that is the presentation layer, from the persistence layer, so that in future you could switch different database more easily?
Yeah, that's also a really good question. What I would do, and I did it in some of my applications, is have a Mobix store in the middle. So the Mobix is the thing that actually listens to Firebase. And then when it gets new data, it just updates fields in the Mobix store. And the components are observing the store and not the Firebase. So, so you can change the implementation of the database, you can change your UI, and nothing is coupled because you have this mediator in the middle. The thing that you need to remember is that in Firebase, it's good if you decide that you go with Firebase and you want this coupling and you're okay with this coupling. So it's good that every component would listen to something even very specific in the database, because otherwise, if you thought about like having a big component that listens to the entire database and every change it updates its children, then every change, every time someone is pressing a key somewhere, it would update the entire database and your whole tree will render. It's not a good idea. So the best idea is to have the nodes, like only the smallest components that you can think of, listening to specific parts in the database or in your Mobix store. But yeah, I think a Mobix store is a very good way to abstract the use of the database.
Thank you, Liad. I think that's it. But if you have any more questions, please reach out to Liad during the break. You can reach out to him and he'll be happy to answer.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Liad. That was a really informative talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Enjoy the rest of the day.